Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Emily and this is That Carnivore Life. In today's episode, I'm actually doing my first ever interview. There was an account on Instagram that I started following. It was one of the first Instagram accounts I first followed when I created my carnivore Instagram. And I've been really intrigued by some of the things that she has shared in regards to herself because it reminded me of people in my life and the health conditions they're going through, and so I was intrigued. Well, I've been following her for about 4 months now, and this week I reached out to her and asked her if she would be a guest on my channel for the purpose of me interviewing her and finding out about her journey onto carnivore and where she's at now. And P.S. like this video, subscribe to my channel, select the bell notification to be notified of future uploads, and please come follow me on Instagram, thatcarnivorelife.gram. Everyone, I'd like you to join me in welcoming Ribeye Rach to today's episode.
Firstly, Rach, I love the name. Ribeye is my favorite kind of steak. I'm guessing it's yours too.
Yes, it definitely is. I guess it has to be, right?
Yeah, it kind of does, seeing as it's your name. Well, I actually don't know an awful lot about Rachel, but she is one of the first people that I started following when I started my carnivore Instagram and has just blown my mind away. But the reason why I wanted to interview Rachel is as I was watching her Instagram posts and her stories, I noticed sort of the way that she was talking and some of the things that she was talking about without really saying an awful lot. And it sounded like she was dealing with some health things that someone close to me deals with. And so I started paying some more attention as to, was she addressing these with carnivore? What was she doing? Was she seeing improvement? And so I decided that I wanted to interview her on my channel and find out a little bit more. So Rachel, would you like to share with everyone who doesn't know you on my channel a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Emily. I'm excited to chat with you and just share a little bit about my story. But so basically, the way that I came to the carnivore way of eating was several years into my chronic illness journey. I kind of just came across it and then started researching more and more. But basically, about 5 or 6 years ago now, I became very ill, and prior to becoming chronically sick, I was very active. I was in college, I was rock climbing instructor, and everything was going like pretty well with life. And but I grew up on a pretty standard American diet, but at least up until that point, it didn't really affect me too much. Like, I was able to function very well, I was able to exercise and just do all the normal things. But I started, so at the point that I started getting sick, I was exercising probably 3 or 4 hours a day. So I was pushing my body really hard while I was probably not fueling my body quite properly. And I was gluten-free, but that you can still be pretty unhealthy when you're gluten-free. And so other than that, I started coming down with a lot of symptoms that pretty quickly became debilitating. I was getting dizzy while I was working out, and I was getting really bad migraines and just like weird neurological symptoms like brain fog and pretty severe fatigue. And it eventually came to the point where I wasn't able to go to school like in person anymore. And I was struggling just to kind of like cook for myself and like, just the daily bare minimum basics of like taking care of yourself was a pretty big struggle. And throughout my journey, I was diagnosed with a lot of different conditions. First, dysautonomia or POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. And then I was later diagnosed with quite a few other things, like Chiari malformation. I was diagnosed with intracranial hypertension, so like high pressure in the brain.
Wow.
Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder, and just things like gastroparesis, just all sorts of things were just kind of going wrong. And I went the traditional medicine route for several years, and that's just kind of what I thought was what you do,
Yeah,
And
totally.
I thought that would, and at first I was like, all right, like I'm gonna get better, like a doctor will be able to help me get over this,
Yeah.
and that really wasn't the case. We went to lots and lots of doctors. I was fortunate enough to be able to see specialists for all these conditions I had, but ultimately they really weren't able to do very much for me. And over those years, I had 5 brain and neurosurgeries.
Wow.
And so I have like stents in my brain to try to like increase the blood flow, and then my skull is fused to my neck, and they shaved a piece of the bottom of my skull off to try to make room for my brain with the Chiari malformation. But none of these surgeries or treatments really brought me like long lasting relief. Sometimes, it would help one thing, but then like months later, something else would get worse. And like,
Mm-hmm.
it just didn't really like significantly increase my quality of life to the way that like I hoped some of
Wow.
the events would. And so at a really, desperate point, I started to kind of shift in the way that I was looking for, like healing, and started to look in kind of like alternative directions. And so at that point, I started seeing like some naturopaths, and at that point, I was diagnosed with chronic Lyme disease, and which I think, could be the root of all of the health issues that went wrong. Because, that EDS with the connective tissue disorder, it's really just a clinical diagnosis. They say, it's an incurable genetic disease, but nobody really knows that for sure.
Uh-huh.
And I think at that point, I started treatment for Lyme disease, and at my sickest, I was bedbound, and even things like rolling over in bed just felt just so hard. Like it's hard to describe that, I guess. But just things that I had never experienced before, and I really felt like at that point, like I was dying, and I just was desperate to find something to help. And so I did a series of Lyme treatments, which was like kind of a combination of natural and like herbal sort of remedies, and then antibiotics. And I tried a few diets for a while there. Like I tried paleo, I tried refined sugar free, and sort of like lower carb. And then I also went vegetarian for a while,
Wow.
and
Okay.
that didn't really go so well.
Okay.
Thankfully, that was only for a few months, so it wasn't like I was one of, someone. I know a lot of people in the carnivore community kind of find their way to carnivore through being, vegetarian or vegan for a really long
Yeah.
years like that. But that wasn't the case for me. But then I came across somebody that I followed in the Lyme disease community posted something like, I went carnivore for a month and all my chronic pain went away, and I was like, what? Like that sounds crazy, but like I was interested. So I just like
Yeah.
came into it, and I had remembered like a couple of years before I heard that my brother-in-law had been watching Jordan Peterson and had heard
Mm-hmm.
Michaela's story, and he told me about that, and he was like, yeah, like she had some crazy autoimmune disorders, and she put those into remission through like only eating beef and salts. And I was like, that's crazy. But I mean, I figured it was like, it's not that I didn't believe it. It was just that I was like, well, that's probably just this unique thing that's just worked for her, and didn't really look into it more at that point. Like I thought, I don't have arthritis. I have other
Yeah.
chronic conditions. And so I thought, that it wouldn't apply. And, doctors for years had told me like diet didn't matter, and that it didn't matter what I was eating. And so I tried to be like as healthy as I could, but I wasn't anywhere near like a completely whole foods healthy diet or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I just started looking into carnivore at that point, and I did a lot of research. I was really nervous because I was at such a vulnerable point at my journey where I was like, I can't afford to get worse. And so I was nervous that by doing this diet, I could do some sort of damage, or that I could, end up in a worse place than I already was. And I didn't want to risk that. But I was also like just amazed at all the stories that I was reading about carnivore. And I'd done a lot of research on other diets, that I had tried in the past. And there was just such an overwhelmingly positive vibe as I was like searching through Facebook groups and YouTube videos and all sorts of different communities where people that had done the carnivore way of eating were sharing their story with chronic illnesses. And I was just amazed at like how many different physical and mental conditions that people had seen healing from. And it was almost like there was somebody that had every condition or ailments and had seen relief from this way of eating. And I really did a lot of digging, and I felt like I almost couldn't find anybody to say something negative about it that had truly given it a good try, gotten over the transition and all that. And so I was like, I got to try this, and so I just went for it. And I'm really glad that I did, because it's changed my life, and I'm just really thankful. And so at this point now, I am, I think, getting close to 8 months carnivore, and then I did about 5.5, I think, months of the stricter lion diet version with just the meats and salt. And I'm just now starting to try to introduce some other carnivore foods back in there and experiment with that. But it was a rough transition in the beginning, but I really, really believed in like how healing this way of eating can be. And so I just really stuck with it, and things eventually did start to improve. And I just think, sometimes in the carnivore community, I feel like I get a vibe of like, do this for 30 days and you'll be healed of everything. And that hasn't been my experience at all. Like, I'm still have a really long way to come before I'm healed. But like, I don't think I can expect to be healed overnight from all these things. So yeah.
Wow. Gosh. That is so much, Rachel. And like hearing you talk and take us up to the point where you're like, actually, I'm seeing improvement and I feel so much better, is like, we know that there is like that happily ever after type of situation that you're starting to enter into compared to where you were. But I mean, I have so many questions. The first thing I noticed when you were talking, which I hadn't realized, the Chiari malformation, I have a friend who has that. And then I had several friends or people close to me who have POTS. Some call it POTS, some call it dysautonomia. One particular person has POTS, has EDS, has hypermobility, has PCO, I think it's PCOS, no, endometriosis. And, like, which you didn't mention, but, just what I'm noticing is that when someone has something like EDS or POTS, they typically have a whole lot of other conditions as well. It's not just POTS or EDS, but it's, several things. And fortunately, I haven't seen her fully bedridden. I mean, my perception of what you experienced is that you were essentially fully bedridden for, more than a week.
Yes. Yeah. So I would say for years, I was 95% plus bedridden. And then I had months and phases where it was like completely bedridden. So
how did that affect you mentally?
It was very difficult. Thankfully, my family has been very supportive, and my husband has been very supportive. And I actually got married amidst all of this, but it was really, really took a deep dive for the worst. So it was good that I don't think we wouldn't have been able to have the wedding that we had if we had waited longer. But for me, at least, my faith has been a huge support and just anchor for me through all of this. And I guess I'm just trying to find good amidst the suffering. And I don't think anybody in life is immune to suffering and hardships, and we all experience it in different ways. And this was just a part of my story. And I think now that I'm starting to heal and, have an improvement in quality of life, I'm able to just see the good that has come out of it. And I just really hope that I can encourage others to not give up on healing, and just not give up hope, because even in the darkest of places, because there's always hope. One of my Lyme disease doctors that I really liked always said, when there's life, there's hope. And so
Yes.
I think that's such a cool thing. And it's just amazing sometimes seeing the transformations that people can have in their health, and how resilient our bodies are, and how we really have an innate ability to heal. It just can be really hard to access sometimes. And
Yeah.
so thankfully, mentally, I haven't had too much depression. I know a lot of people with chronic illness and people who don't have chronic illness suffer from really severe depression. And so I've kind of had certain bouts of it, and ebbs and flows, but thankfully haven't had too bad of a struggle with that.
Okay, that's good. That's really good. I know for me, having my own health struggles, mental health has been something that has played into it, and faith has been really huge in keeping me going. I don't think I would be alive today if I didn't have faith. I don't know how someone who doesn't have a faith could survive all of that. And I'm really grateful for the faith that I have, that I've grown up with, and what I have now. And I'm
That's
so
awesome.
glad to hear that it's been helpful for you.
Yes,
Yeah.
it certainly has. I agree. I can't imagine going through things like this without having faith.
Awesome. Well, I do want to talk more about the improvements that you have seen, especially what you were experiencing and how you're experiencing that now. But before we do that, you talked about your journey into finding carnivore and the lion diet, and then starting that. So I hear about people such as Bella, the steak and butter girl, and she was vegan for 6 years, and then overnight from December 31 to January 1st went full vegan to full carnivore. And then I hear about other people, and this has probably been more, well, it is more my journey, where they go full carnivore, but then every couple of weeks, or they might have a non-carnivore snack, or they'll do a week where several times in the week they'll have something each time that non-carnivore. And so they're sort of inching their way into carnivore a little bit by little bit. What was it like for you? And then in addition to that, a lot of people go through an adaptation phase, and that adaptation phase involves a ridiculous amount of number 2 fire hose bathroom visits in a day, let alone overnight. And so you were bedridden. Were you aware of that possibility in the adaptation phase? So was it a surprise? Were you aware of it? How did you prepare for it? How did you tackle that? Yeah, so did you go cold turkey, or what was your process?
So no, I did not go cold turkey. I didn't want to, because I was already in such a vulnerable state. I didn't want to do something so jarring and drastic to my body and my gut, that I didn't want to make it more difficult than it needed to be. So I think I actually, if I were to start again, I would have even more gradually gone into it than I did. I think, especially for people with pretty serious chronic illnesses, I don't know that it's actually a good idea to go straight into it 100% overnight, just from standard American to 100% carnivore. I think that's a bit of a shock to the body, and and is can be tricky to recover from, and maybe, could lead to a longer transition phase. But I started out with 1 carnivore meal a day, and did that for a week. And then I went to 2. I did that for another week. And then actually I did 2 carnivore meals a day for 2 weeks. And then I went 100%. So I think it was between a 2 and a 3 week transition into, what I was eating before to 100% strict carnivore. And during my first few weeks, I really struggled with low blood sugars. And during my chronic illness journey, I have been prone to fainting and non-epileptic seizures. And so during the first, I think, 10 days had a little bit of honey, just when I really was feeling like just my blood sugar I just wanted to be safe with it. I was kind of in the beginning when I started having like really rough symptoms, I was just like not even with it like mentally at all. And I was like, okay, like we need to be safe with this. And just but after the first 10 days those really severe blood sugar issues normalized, and thankfully at that point I cut out all the honey. In the beginning I actually was thinking I was gonna like go 100% lion diet and all in, but I found that I just wasn't quite ready for that.
Yeah.
So I did a couple of months of mostly all beef, but I would have like a couple meals a week with some bacon or some chicken. That was like my special dessert.
Yeah.
And I'd have some butter and stuff like that. But yeah, after I started, I was and still have been 100% strict. I've never deviated or gone off of the diet. And really that's just because I wanted to give my body the best chance to heal. And, you know, it's already hard to do this way of eating in the beginning. And so I just didn't want to lose any of the progress that I was making or cause any delays in progress, I guess you could say. So I've been really strict with it. But other than that, yeah, the transition was rough. I had a phase where I like hated eating beef. Like I had a really bad aversion. I know, Ribeye Rach, right? I like had some weeks there where I was like, I'd rather be tube fed this than like eat it myself. I just was like forcing like I think I was under eating in the beginning too. So I think that was another reason why my transition was a bit more difficult, just because I wasn't eating enough. And so initially I did lose a little bit of weight, but I was trying to gain weight. And so that was another concern before I started, because I was underweight when I started. And now at this point, I think I have gained about 15 pounds.
Amazing.
Since the beginning. So pretty close to normal now, which is good. And so it is possible. I think some people, you know, see it as only like a weight loss diet, but I see it as a health optimization diet. And if somebody wants or needs to lose or gain weight, then I think it's possible either way. And
so I've said to people, if you want to eat carnivore, but you're someone who needs to gain weight, then make sure you're eating a reasonable amount of dairy for your body type. Now, am I correct in that you have gained weight but haven't consumed dairy?
The first 2 months I did.
Okay.
But after that, no.
So I would have
to incorporate dairy again, some raw dairy again now. But up until like a couple of days ago, I hadn't had dairy for the last almost 6 months.
And you've still gained weight in that time on just like meat and fat.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
I'm definitely thankful for it. Something that I know another part of your question, you were saying like with the GI issues in the beginning, I still have them like now. And so that's something that I felt like I've been trying to troubleshoot with, but I definitely don't feel that my gut has healed. And
why do you think that you still have the GI issues and you haven't moved through that?
It's a good question. I just think that I don't know that my gut hasn't healed yet. And so I don't know if it's just a longer healing process for me than the average. But in some ways it has improved. Like before I started the carnivore diet, I just struggled to eat so much. Like during my chronic illness journey, I came close to needing a feeding tube a few times.
Wow. Okay.
So like would eat a couple of bites, and like just the symptoms that would come on from eating just made it a struggle to eat. And now I can eat a lot. I mean, meat and like a pound of meat in a sitting. So I normally eat like 2 meals a day. And so I get to like 2 pounds of meat a day. But that's been cool that I have been able to eat a lot more. But yeah, as for like the diarrhea, constipation sort of side of things that is still not been resolved for me yet. So
Okay. It's interesting that you say that, because I have noticed for me, if I have a meal that has what I call, from me, too high a fat, it might not be too high fat for someone else, but for
Mhm.
my body, then I notice I am in the bathroom. But then if I don't have enough fat, then I notice I struggle to go. And so I've
Yeah.
sort of found this sweet spot. I'll sort of look at the steak and go, okay, there's not enough fat on that. I need some butter, or that's really fatty, no butter.
Yeah.
And I'm able to tweak it that way. But like what
Mhm.
you're saying, I wonder if that is because my gut hasn't healed yet. I have a history of Crohn's disease. And
Oh, wow.
so, as many people know, if you don't know, with Crohn's disease, that will give you diarrhea. You can have that 12 times a day. It's just
Yeah,
crazy. And so that was a concern for me, going carnivore. And so I
definitely.
actually started really lean. I was having chicken, I'd have 1 or 2 eggs, I'd have like a little bit of bacon. I wasn't having butter with any of my meals. And then as I noticed my body start to adapt, I would have a steak instead of chicken, or I'd add some butter to my chicken. And now I have anywhere from 2 to 3 ribeye steaks a day, and often with butter. And,
Awesome.
I'm a lot more stable. But like what you're saying, I'm still having those issues
Yeah.
and have to play with the amount of fat that I eat in a meal.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've tried all the, or not, I'm not all. I don't like it when people say I've tried everything, because nobody's tried everything. But
Yes.
um I've tried a lot of things, I guess. Trying to adjust fat levels and magnesium, electrolytes, all sorts of different things, but haven't been able to get to a normal point with my gut.
Mhm.
I don't know if you looked into the GAPS diet at all or heard of it.
I heard about it when I needed to go FODMAP.
Okay.
So I went low FODMAP. Sorry, not FODMAP. That would have been terrible. So I went low FODMAP, and about 9 months after I went low FODMAP, I also had to remove a whole lot of foods from my diet that a naturopath confirmed that I was allergic to. So I was
Okay.
on like my own, crazy way of eating. And this was back in 2013, I think, was when
Wow.
I first, was navigating both of those ways of eating together. And I didn't find carnivore until June 2020. So
Okay.
I went, all of that time, I was eating low FODMAP. I did some of those foods that I had allergies to, I did add back in. And then by the time I got to June 2020, where I found out carnivore, I had added in some of those FODMAP foods in smaller quantities, and was, thinking that I was getting away with it, but I was really deceiving myself. I find it really interesting when we're eating that sort of standard American diet, even if we are gluten free, or even if we are low carb on that standard, I call it a standard Western diet, it actually prevents us from being able to correctly interpret what our body is saying. So I'm getting away with having some avocado, when in actual fact, avocado is high in sorbitol, and sorbitol is something that my body malabsorbs. But because I was, eating such a broad Western diet, I wasn't able to interpret, there's the brain fog, there's the GI issues, there's the sleep disturbances, there's, so many things like headaches and vision disturbances. And I didn't even recognize that I was experiencing those, let alone associating it to the fact I'd just eaten a quarter of an avocado, and that was the trigger.
Oh, wow. That's interesting.
Yeah, it is.
Crazy. It's crazy how all these foods that we're taught are healthy may not actually be contributing to our health. And
Yeah.
I think something that I've been looking into for gut healing is, so the GAPS diet it's not, there's like a carnivore version called like a no plants
Okay.
version of GAPS, but it's supposed to be a gut healing protocol, and the main backbone of it is meat stock. So they have people
Okay.
drink I think 4 or 5 cups of meat stock a day, and in the beginning I think you only have boiled meats, so it's supposed to be like super easy on your gut and allow for more like healing and sealing of the gut. So I've been interested in that, and just trying to find a way to like truly heal my gut, because while carnivore has helped tremendously and I'm really thankful for that, I'm like looking for that true level of healing, because I think once so many symptoms and diseases stem from the gut that I'm like, wow, I think
Yes.
if I heal the gut, then I really could accelerate the rest of my healing. And so, yeah, I think it's a tricky thing to figure out. There's so many different things to experiment with, and yeah, so many different options too in the carnivore community that it can feel overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah. So you talked about the GAPS diet using broths. Now, I couldn't work out for so long why I could slow cook foods that only had low to no FODMAP foods. It didn't have any of the foods that irritated me. Yet if I slow cooked them, I was as sick as a dog before I'd even finished maybe like a cup of that particular food, whether it was a soup, a stock, a broth, Mexican, Indian, like whatever it was. And I know you've talked about, or I think you've talked about on your Instagram about having histamine issues. And someone said to me recently that bone broth, because it's slow cooked, is high in histamines, and that can be why it's not tolerated by people. So if you're looking at doing GAPS and you're dealing with histamine, what would that look like for you, or are you not sure yet?
Yeah, so GAPS actually, they don't use bone broth. They use the difference is it's called meat stock, and so it's only boiled for a couple of hours versus the longer, like
amazing
8 to 48 hours that people do with broth, which is really high in histamine. And so meat stock can be anywhere from 1 to 4 hours on the stove. And some people that are sensitive, I think, do it in the pressure cooker, which you can do in just a couple of hours. And so that's kind of the sort of stock that I've been drinking. I know it's kind of confusing with like,
it's not though,
and then bone broth. But I've heard kind of just through looking around in the GAPS diet community that some people are so sensitive to the histamines that in the beginning they literally just boil it for like 30 minutes, and then they start with that, and then they just build their way up until they can tolerate like bigger levels of it and longer cook times. But yeah, with the GAPS diet, it's not just the bones. Like they typically cook the meats, like say, you know, whether it's like a whole chicken, you just put a whole chicken in, and then you drink the stock from that. And so it's kind of nice because you're making the stock and a meal kind of at the same time.
Yes. Wow. I find this really interesting. And you've actually taught me some things that I didn't expect to hear from you in our conversation today. What you're talking about with doing a meat broth, but only cooking it for a short amount of time on the stove. That's something that I did myself because I wanted a soup. Okay. And so I made a meat broth on the stove for 30 to 45 minutes. And I started with like literally half a cup, and I did that for 2 or 3 days, and I was okay. And then 3 times in one day, because I was craving soup so much, I had 3 big bowls. So like 1 bowl 3 times a day, and I wasn't sick at all, and I couldn't believe it. And you know, when someone's I know, I think it was back when I first, you know, was having issues, you know, in 2013 when I first changed both ways that I was eating. Someone said to me, well, maybe you've got a histamine issue, and they tried to explain. I'm like, no, I don't have a histamine issue. But going carnivore this time, and then with what you've just said now, I'm like, oh, I think I do have a histamine issue. And I have asked doctors, gastroenterologists, naturopaths like you. I've asked probably about 8 or 9 people, you know, why do you think it is that I get so sick? You know, when I cook, you know, buttered chicken with all safe ingredients in my own home, and I know exactly what's in it, and I get so sick. No one could tell me. And so to hear that it's histamine, I'm like, oh, now I know.
It sounds like you were even kind of doing some of that without even knowing it, with making mistakes and feeling better with that. That's cool. Yeah. And another thing that I learned too is that typically beef from the grocery store is aged for around 30 days or more. So I've been eating unaged meat, and I think sometimes people do better with lamb that have histamine issues, and I think it's just generally because it's not aged nearly as long as beef is. And chicken isn't aged, so sometimes people do better with chicken. But then there's sometimes people are sensitive to the feed that chicken get, and so many different things.
There is, yeah.
But yeah, I've been ordering mostly unaged meats and eating that for a while now, and I've gotten to the point where I can tolerate a little bit of the aged stuff, normal grocery store meat. here and there okay, and I'm starting to try to push like the cook times out a little bit further, and
Uh-huh.
that's been going okay. I found that things like being out in the sun and being outside, spending a lot of time outside when possible, does help with like my histamine reactions
Okay.
and that thing. And so yeah, I'm just trying to like look into all different methods of healing. And yeah, I think there's a mindset aspect of it too. And
Hmm. Yeah, that's so
um
interesting. Well, I would
right.
love to hear from you what conditions, what effects on your everyday life, like what you were experiencing before carnivore, how you were impacted, and then what you're experiencing now. What improvements have you seen? Have you seen anything where it's been fully resolved? So for me, I would get like plaque and chalkiness on my teeth.
Mhm.
And as long as I eat carnivore, I don't get that at all. But if I have even a few spoonfuls of, say, ice cream, if I have a weak moment and have a few spoonfuls of ice cream, I immediately have that chalky texture on my teeth. I hate it now.
Wow,
I didn't
that's
notice
crazy.
it because I'd lived with it my whole life. And so that now for me is resolved, and dry eyes is resolved as well. But then I still have like pain I still get, but it is reduced. So what are you seeing? What have you fully recovered from? And what improvements?
Good questions. So I would say I sometimes I like to compare like my energy and functionality levels to like a battery percentage.
Yes.
And so before, when I was bedbound, I'd say I was pretty close to 1% because I just, I it was almost like the bed was the charger. Like I couldn't like function
Hmm.
outside of it. And now I would say I'm probably 15%, which is, has a long way left to go. But when you compare that to 1%, it's like
Yes.
crazy improvements.
Wow.
And so just in my overall functionality has improved a lot. For years, I wasn't able to cook my own meals. Now I cook all my own meals.
Oh my goodness.
And so that has been just like a fun thing for me. And my walking ability has improved. My fatigue has improved. It's still a big limiting factor for me, but it's something that just has gradually improved. And I would get these fatigue crashes where if I would like overdo it, I would just have like all these crazy like neurological symptoms, and just like basically felt like I couldn't move. Like things like lifting up my arm would feel
Okay.
like lead weights attached to me.
Wow.
And let's see, my migraines have started to improve, and just like I would get tingling in my legs and hands, and that has improved a lot. What else? Brain fog has started to improve. It's still there, but it's like beforehand I could always read some, but like it would take me, like I could only do it for short periods of time, and it would take me, I'd have to read things over and over and over again to like process them.
Uh-huh.
And now I feel like I'm kind of starting to get my brain back. Like I'm starting to be able to read more and take in more information, and just like process things better. But another thing is that I'm able to be around people more, just like things like noise and sound, and like the more people I was around, like the bigger the group of people that I was around, even if it's just my family, like I
Uh-huh.
I, I just couldn't handle it. Like it was like a really big trigger for pain and symptoms. And
Wow.
yeah, just like it was almost like every like little noise and sound was amplified. And yeah, and I don't know, hard to explain, but yeah, that has improved. So I've been able to be around, go to like a family dinner, or
Fantastic.
spend more time with them, and not spend days debilitated in bed afterwards. And that's
Hmm.
another thing. When I overdo it, I recover quicker. Like
Oh,
if I
good.
overdone it in the past, like it would be days at least to recover. And now it's like usually less than a day before, I recover. And so that's another really good thing. Let's see what else. I would say my like overall like body aches and joint pain from the EDS has definitely improved, which I think is pretty cool. I remember when I
Yes.
was looking up trying to see if there were any other people with EDS that had done carnivore and like how it affected them. Like I found somebody that had said they had been doing it for a few months and they were like 90% of my pain is gone, and I was just like, that's just
Wow.
incredible, and just the fact that like most people don't know about this or think it's crazy, is just really sad to me, because
Yes.
I think it could be an incredible life-altering healing tool for so many people.
Yes, agreed. Wow, I'm so glad to hear that you're seeing improvements in things like EDS, because from what I know of EDS through this person in my life is that it's incurable and you just suffer for your whole life. And so to hear that you're actually getting improvement is incredible. Have
Yeah.
you seen any improvements with the pot?
I have started to see improvements with POTS. That's kind of one of the later things to improve, but I'm able, like for example, so we live in a forest. I'm sitting
Yes,
outside right here, but we have a
beautiful.
really long driveway, and I had not been able to make it to the end of the driveway, but this week I did, and so
Congratulations.
thank you. So I made it to the end of the driveway and back, and then the other day I made it like even further past that, and so I'm just trying to push my walking ability, and yeah, I'm able to stand for longer, and like I said, able to cook my own meals, which like just the action of like standing and reaching up into cupboards and stuff like that would really aggravate my POTS beforehand. And
Wow.
so I'm definitely starting to improve on that front too. And yeah, I'm thankful, and my opinions on EDS have also pretty greatly changed. I feel
Okay.
like it's, they say it's an incurable genetic disease, but I feel like I mean, just these are just guesses and theories that I think about this a lot, but I feel like it almost has like an autoimmune sort of pattern
Hmm.
versus like, because I feel like most people I know with EDS were doing pretty well, were like athletes, and then all of a sudden their health like plummets and they have
Yes.
all these crazy diseases. And like I was, I guess, before I got really sick, I never would have like thought that I had some kind of incurable disease.
That, yeah.
And, and then all of a sudden I'm being told I'm going to be sick for the rest of my life. And I didn't want to believe it.
Yeah.
And I think, I started to believe it after years of being told that, but now I'm starting to say like, why can't this damage be reversed? Like, why can't
Exactly. Hmm.
I get back to where I was before or close? I think I can fully heal. Like, I don't think I'm going to be sick
Yeah.
for, and I think even just like in the last month, I really have started to like shift from that, like, oh, I'm just trying to get the best quality of life I can possibly have with this disease, to like, no, like I can fully heal. And even just believing that has like changed things for me, I think.
Wow.
And so yeah, I don't know. It's really just sad to me that it, because EDS, I mean, there are more rare types of EDS that they have
Yes.
gene markers for, but the majority of people with EDS, it's just a symptom checklist. That's all it is.
Yes. Okay.
And
Wow.
and so in my mind, I'm like, what do they really know about it? Like, and it's sad that people are being put in these boxes of like, okay, now this is my identity forever. And yeah, it just makes me sad because these people are really sick, and I just want to believe that there's a way for them to at least greatly improve their quality of life.
It's interesting that you're talking that way. I was in a meeting yesterday, and there was a lady who's 70 years old, and she's been doing carnivore now, I think it's 18 months.
Okay.
And when she was young, she suffered from one of those illnesses that we don't see anymore, and I think she nearly died from it, if I'm remembering correctly. And
Okay.
she became partially deaf, so I think fully deaf in one ear or partially deaf in both. And she got, I think it was a hole in her heart, but her heart was affected structurally, actually. And so she's been told her entire life, you cannot exercise, you cannot exert yourself because your heart will stop and you will die. And she found carnivore, 18 months ago, and she started eating carnivore. And so her heart had a murmur. And so she went to her specialist, and the specialist, it took them a really long time to find this heart murmur, and they could barely hear it. And they said to her, what are you doing? And the doctor said to her, when she told him I'd been doing carnivore, he said, well, I think I need to start recommending this to my patients. And not only this, is I think it's in 2 or 3 months, she's going to be having a scan on her heart, which will confirm whether or not this murmur is healing, which they say can't happen. And so to hear, like, things that aren't supposed to heal are healing, and I know with Crohn's disease, they say that you never heal from it. You go into remission. It's just you're in remission for 20 years, 30 years, 35 years. Oh, you were in remission until you died. And so I have no expectations that people who have, especially severe Crohn's disease, get in full remission from carnivore. 10, 15 years later, they're still in full remission, still on carnivore. I have no expectation that anyone is going to change that language around Crohn's disease, that they'll be considered healed and taken off a Crohn's diagnosis. But I know that has happened for type 2 diabetes, actually, that I know of someone who had type 2 diabetes, went Crohn's. They no longer had type 2 diabetes. They got off all the medication, and the doctor said, I'm actually removing type 2 diabetes from your list of conditions. And so they're now no longer considered a diabetic. But apparently it's, once you're a diabetic, you're always a diabetic. So I think that's really interesting that you're having these thoughts around EDS, and I think you said POTS too.
Yeah, it's really interesting. That's a really cool story that you told about your friend that has a heart condition. I mean, it's just, that's awesome that the doctor has, believed them and looked into it and wanted to learn more about carnivore, thinking about recommending it to other patients, because I feel like sometimes that's not always the case.
Yes.
With there's
yes.
But it's things like that give me hope that more people will have access to this sort of knowledge and healing, hopefully in the future. What really amazes me about all of this is that, I spent a lot of time researching for the first years of my chronic illness, and never once, I had never heard of the carnivore diet. Like, I
agreed.
hadn't
Me too.
heard the word carnivore, or the idea that somebody could eat all meat and find healing that way, or feel better, more energy, feel better that way. And that just kind of amazed me, because I was looking during all those years through all these rabbit holes of like trying to find answers and trying to find treatments so that I could get back to living life. But I mean, it's just crazy that there are so many that haven't even heard of it.
Yeah, agreed. Well, I'm aware we're encroaching on an hour, so I don't want to go too much longer. I could talk to you all day. I'm loving chatting with you and hearing what you have to say. And so there is, I'm hoping I'm going to send this interview to the people in my life who have POTS and have EDS, especially that person who has multiple. And then I've got my friend who has the Chiari malformation. And I'm sure there's going to be people that watch this who have those conditions as well. What would you like to say to them in particular?
Yeah, I guess what I would want to share with people like that is, if you're really in the thick of it and just having a rough time and in a really dark place, like, don't give up hope. There's always hope, and don't be afraid to try things that might be a little bit out of the box. And like what I thought, carnivore was, and also, just do what's feels best for you. And if you do try this way of eating, just know that it's not going to be overnight results. It's not going to be, it could be a rough few weeks or first few months of this way of eating. You may feel worse before you feel better. And so that's something to keep in mind, because I think sometimes people will try a certain diet for a few weeks and say, oh, that didn't work for me because, they had a low carb flu or whatever it is. And that's hard when you're already really sick, to have something else on top top of it to deal with. It's hard to push through that, but I definitely think that, you know, carnivore is an amazing way of eating. I think the GAPS diet, there's a book that's written by Dr. Natasha McBride on the GAPS diet protocol is an amazing one that I've seen. And she actually has a section in her book about connective tissue disorders, which I found very, very interesting. So I recommend that as well. But yeah, just don't lose hope and do what feels best for you, and just believe that healing is possible, because I really think it is for most or all people that are chronically ill. So
yeah. And so just for them as well, or for everyone listening to this, is there any negative that you have found with carnivore? And then what have you done to combat that? Or are you just like, no, carnivore is amazing, it's like Disneyland?
Oh, no, it's hard. I mean, it's really hard in the beginning. I think in my situation, because I wasn't in social situations at that point, that wasn't really a big aspect for me, and it still actually isn't. But I could see that as being one of the biggest and hardest aspects of carnivore, is just the social aspect of it, and just constantly being around other people, cravings for foods that you used to eat. It's hard. I mean, anybody who says that it's easy, like, I don't know, because and I think once you start to see the benefits of it, then it does become a lot easier. And I would say, you know, remember why you're doing what you're doing, because that's the biggest motivator right there, is like trying to give your body the best chance it can to heal and to, you know, have the best quality of life you can. I mean, that's, I guess, the best advice I could give. It's not easy. It's not an easy thing.
Yeah, I certainly have found the same. For me, I would add in the number 2 bathroom visits. That was something I was used to, having a history of Crohn's. So I'm like, okay, know where the bathroom is, you know, plan when I'm going to eat my meal a little bit, just so I'm like, okay, so I'm going to eat my meal, but then like 30 minutes, maybe an hour and a half later, I'm going to need a bathroom. Where am I going to be? I'll wait until I've gone to the bathroom twice, and then I'll go to the grocery store. Does that grocery store have a bathroom, and where is it? You know, and so just doing a little bit of planning while I was adjusting. But I think for me, what has been most hard of late, and you know, I would say I'm a seasoned carnivore, even though I haven't been 100% carnivore 100% of the time, because I originally started in June 2020, is that the social side. So as you know, COVID's become less and less, and we're socializing more and more, people are like, hey, let's go out here and let's go out there. And I'm like, oh, I don't mind, I'll get a cup of tea. But then I'm like, all the food that's there that I could possibly order, and then being in a social setting, for me, the social aspect is really hard, and I'm still learning how to navigate that for sure. Okay, so I'm assuming your family support you eating carnivore. Am I right?
Yes, thankfully they have been very supportive. And in that setting, it's been good. I mean, I've had family members, you know, make completely plain carnivore meals for me.
Amazing.
Usually, if there's a family dinner, I'll just like bring something with me. And on my birthday last year, it was a couple weeks after I started carnivore, my brother-in-law made me a birthday steak, and in it, and they all sang to me, and that was just, you know, it was,
I love that. And
so I think that's going to be a new tradition, is a birthday steak instead of a birthday cake. But yeah, I know not everybody has that support, and so I'm thankful that they've been really supportive of me in my journey.
Oh, that's so good to hear. Well, before we wrap up, is there anything else that you would like to share with everyone today?
I don't think so. I've really enjoyed chatting with you, and I want to hear more about your story, so we may have to do another chat soon.
We may have to. Well, do you have a YouTube and an Instagram? Is that the best way for people to get in touch with you if they're wanting to maybe DM you and ask you some questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So my YouTube channel is just Ribeye Rach, and then my Instagram is @Ribeye Rach. So
@Ribeye Rach. Perfect. Well, Rachel, thank you so much for jumping on and agreeing to be interviewed by me, and just sharing your story and being really vulnerable and transparent with everyone today. I am confident that people are going to find what you have had to say really helpful in their own health journey. So thank you so, so much. And yeah, everyone jump on Ribeye Rach, jump on the bandwagon, find her on Instagram at Ribeye Rach, find her on YouTube, Ribeye Rach. I've been watching your videos on YouTube and I love them. It's just so great to hear some of your everyday life and follow along. And I find it encouraging for me, and it helps me stick to the goals that I've set for myself in carnivore as well. So thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll see you around.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Emily.
Well, everyone, I hope you found that as amazing and beneficial as I have. I learned so many new things from Ribeye Rach that I wasn't actually aware of previous. I was able to connect puzzle pieces together that I hadn't been able to connect together before. And just listening to Rachel's journey from being bedridden and being told that she has these conditions that will never improve and she just has to manage symptoms and it's a life sentence, to discovering carnivore and actually seeing and feeling and experiencing healing in her body. I really do hope that you have found that as amazing and as beneficial as I have. And would you please subscribe to my channel, That Carnivore Life, hit the bell notification to be notified of future uploads like this video, and come follow me on Instagram, thatcarnivorelife.gram. Thank you for joining me today for this extra long episode, but I think you'll agree with me that it was worth it. I'll see you next time.